we intended or ought to be? Where is the country right now, in your view, especially now that we're reflecting on the fight, for democracy and for equality by Kenneth Matiba?
So first, I'd just like to also echo our condolences as Amnesty International to the family, to Susan and the family for the loss of their father, and also to the nation, I think, for one of our, most courageous fighters for democracy. And it's often forgotten, but Kenneth Matiba was actually a prisoner of conscience. Amnesty back in the 1990s adopted him because at that time, like many hundreds of other Kenyans, he stood up against the one-party state, and he stood up really for pluralism. And we adopted him. The Released Political Prisoners organization at that time also adopted him as a political prisoner. So he was known for his courage and for his stand on these issues. And I think for me, the enduring memory of him is really in his stand against the one-party state, and a stand for assembly and freedom of assembly, and a stand for freedom of association. And if we have a plural democracy in Kenya today, that is really his legacy. It's often said that, when the tragedy of dying is not that we die, but that we die without purpose. And I think he probably befits that quote best at this moment. So I think that's the starting point. I would not hesitate to think what he would have thought about Kenya today. I think it's much too early for that, and that really, sadly, has gone with him. But I think what we would probably pick up two things. One is that, I'm not sure that Kenneth Matiba ever thought he would be a national icon. When he was out there in the 1990s and he was essentially on the streets and calling for freedom of expression and freedom of political party and life, he didn't think he would be a national icon. And I think there's a lesson for all Kenyans now that, as we do these things, as we expand our democratic freedoms, as we fight for social justice, as we protect student leaders from police brutality, as we support people in the forests, essentially to have the right as indigenous people to be able to live and continue to forage in the forest, that in a sense is what he was doing.
Yeah.
It's not much different than that. So I think the message to all Kenyans is that, if you want a country that is in the image of the Constitution, go out there and create that country.
But then some would say that, when you take a look at the country today, I think from the last two elections or so, that Kenyans are way more divided, and especially on the basis of tribe. All you have to do is take a look at social media. A number of the young people today who have the freedoms to say what they can say on various platforms. The number of media houses we have in the country that, can speak freely and tackle some rather tough and sensitive subjects. But it sometimes feels, Irũngũ, that we've moved back to where we were in 1990, when, Matiba was getting jailed and imprisoned. Like you said, he was a prisoner of his conscience. Almost seems like we do not have the freedom of thought anymore.
So I'm old enough to remember that period.
Yeah.
And I think the analogy would probably be false. The 1990s were a much more scarier, more frightening place than we currently have right now. Over the last 90 days, Amnesty has been very active in restoring media freedoms. We've been very active in protecting forest dwellers. We've been very active in terms of supporting the rights of people to essentially be free from extrajudicial executions. So we've really been in these trenches, and working with other organizations, we've been really trying to bring the country to a point at which the Constitution is not looking for a country, but actually there is a match between those two. So I wouldn't say that, we have gone, back to the 1990s, but what I would say is that we will go back to the 1990s if people do not like Ken Matiba, essentially rise up. Many of us can complain, we can join the toxicity on the social platforms, but I think what's important about Ken Matiba is that he didn't do that. He actually stood up and began to say that this was unacceptable, and began to organize with many people. And the reason that we can, we can eulogize him today, and actually we will do this us over the next few weeks until he is buried, we will essentially be remembering somebody who stood up against this. And I think that's the message that Ken Matiba leaves with us today.
Indeed, and he did so valiantly. As the Senate Speaker has said in a statement that he released this evening on his behalf and on behalf of the state of the Senate, he says, and I quote, that Matiba fought valiantly for freedom of expression and multi-party democracy. Irũngũ, stay with me. We want to take a short commercial break. When we